I'll never go back there alone. This happened to me when I was 17 years old. I was just about to graduate high school. I was homeschooled and very encouraged to pursue entrepreneurship. I was trying to establish a photography business that I could run after graduating. In order to build my portfolio, I decided to ask a few friends and acquaintances to model for me. I asked a girl I worked with if she and her husband would like to model a couple's session for me. It would be a win-win since they would receive free photos and I would get to add them to my website as sample work. We planned a day to meet and I asked them to meet me at a local park one evening. Something you should know about this park is that it is pretty far out in the country. The park has soccer fields, baseball fields, a golf course, and walking trails, so it is on a large plot of land and fairly secluded. The only house in view of the park is the caretaker's home directly across the street from the entrance. Unless there is an event or a weekend, there is usually not many people there. I felt pretty confident meeting the couple there because I was only planning to arrive about 15 minutes early to set up, so I wouldn't be alone long. The park has an entrance where you can drive down a road into the parking lot to get to all the sports fields, playground, and down to the pond. The front of the park has a large grassy strip, which is where I was planning to set up for my photos. I bypassed the entrance and pulled into a little dirt section at the front of the park and began unloading all of my props. I was always taught to be a cautious person, especially as a young woman, so I took a quick glance to see if anyone was at the park. I saw one car in the parking lot, and two guys tossing a ball in the baseball field, along with their pit bull. Across the street I could see the caretaker out in her yard, so that made me feel a lot better. I decided I would just keep an eye out and continued setting up my things. I would glance up every now and then to make sure that the two men were still on the baseball field. I had no reason to believe they would bother me, but something in my gut just told me to keep watch. The couple I was waiting on seemed to be running late. I finished my setup and glanced up to check on the two guys. To my horror, they were gone. The car was still there, but the men and the dog were nowhere in sight. There was a bit of a hill in front of me that blocked some of the park entrance from sight, so I thought maybe they had just decided to walk one of the nature trails. But again, that feeling in my gut just told me something was wrong. I looked at the caretaker's house and she had gone back inside. I couldn't get everything back to the car quickly, so I just grabbed my camera equipment and hopped in my car. I locked the doors, turned on the ignition, and got my phone out. Literally as soon as I got settled in my car, I see the two guys coming over the hill with their dog. I feel my gut feeling melt into panic. You have to understand, there was no reason for them to come up to where I was. It's literally just an open, grassy yard. If the dog needed to relieve himself, there was plenty of place for that at the wood's edge, or the nature trail, or the walk to the pond, all of which were way closer to them than where I was. They walked around my setup, and when they got to my car, one guy went around the front and the one holding the dog on the leash circled my car. I assumed that they realized I had already noticed they were coming and that I was no longer vulnerable, because they rejoined and walked further down up and around through the soccer field. Once I felt like I was no longer in danger, I glanced down at my phone to see that the couple I was supposed to meet had apparently forgotten about it and were at the beach. I was so fed up at that point, I jumped out of the car, grabbed up all my props, and shoved them into the car. This was my first experience of how scary it can be to be a female out alone. I've had multiple experiences since, but this one sticks out to me the most because I am absolutely certain that those guys intended to do me harm. And what kind of match would a 17-year-old girl be against two grown men and a pit bull? One thing is for certain, I will never go back to that park alone.